I didn't expect the gap between these Noob Haven videos to be this long, but in that time, I have been trying out a few different games and a few different approaches. One of the real difficulties of being an intermediate player in really any fighting game is knowing what you should do in a given situation, but not having the mechanical skill to actually do it. I've been having these kinds of issues in Plus R for a while. I made mention of my stagger dashing issues going back to like the 5th episode of the series of videos where I learned the game. How my issues with movement have cost me a lot of chances at pushing pressure and maintaining my advantages. For a long time, I thought this was something I would just grow out of simply by playing more, but that's proven to not be the case. So while I'm pretty averse to any real regimented practice with regards to gaming, this was an issue I felt needed to be solved in at least an adjacent way. What I started doing was spending 5 minutes in training mode before every session working on my dashes, air dashes, dashes to faultless defense cancelling, and then playing around with the situations that put me in, like going for Renson right after an instant air dash back. This eventually evolved into me working on more combo execution. That was not a good thing. The trouble that came with this was when combos became all I wanted to work on, since what got me into fighting games was how fun it was to explore combos in games like Tekken 7, so this led to me having to refine the process a bit. Like, when I go in there, I'm working on A, B, and C specifically. For me, it was movement, getting more comfortable with Axel's 5K, and getting better at Axel's basic air-to-ground combo. I could approach these elements however I wanted, so it was still a very open-to-interpretation approach to training. Plus, it was only 5 minutes. In the grand scheme of things, that's nothing. But take a second to think about how many dashes, air dashes, B&B combos you could do in that amount of time. It ended up feeling a lot longer than it actually is. The results were almost immediate. I was finally taking advantage of those situations I created, when previously they would have resulted in us resetting back to an even playing field. Off a knockdown from Renson or Rasho, I'm finally dashing in to keep the pressure on, and working on using 5K to make that pressure more effective. Before this, my entire Okizeme game was either 3P, the vast majority of the time, 1P, or 6H. 2 lows and an overhead, all of which were a bit more committal than 5K. 5K also has the benefit of being a lot nicer to the player on counter hit than 3P. Counter hit 3P launches on the first hit, which is fucking annoying because there's not a single combo Axel players would look to use that goes into an air combo on the move right after 3P. It's a confusing design choice the more I think about it. Why does this trip counter hit launch them over my head? Quick editor's note, I actually got it wrong about where counter hit 3P launches them. Instead of launching them above his head, it actually launches them to about the middle of his thigh, which is Axel's truest dead zone. He gets nothing here. Like in theory, you would think you do 5K to launch him up to 5P range, then you do 2S, and then you do air combo stuff. In reality, going for 5K here just pushes them down, and hitting them with anything else lets them air tech out so you lose your position. Your best option on this counter hit is actually to just let them fall on their face off a one-hit knockdown. It's really stupid, and I explain that more as this segment goes on. Just saying it out loud, it might sound like a boon for Axel, but it isn't at all. You're probably thinking that the opponents above you just use one of Axel's billion anti-airs to go into an air combo, except the opponent doesn't get launched high enough for you to do that on reaction with any of those anti-airs, nor is it anything you'd be considering when using 3P in the first place. It puts the opponent in this weird dead zone where Axel doesn't really have anything fast enough to get rewarded for landing a counter hit. The ideal way to react to this situation would be to use 5H, since it does hit the zone right above Axel's head. But here comes another issue. The combination of 3P's animation finishing and 5P's animation coming out leaves you with a really slim window to pull this off, one you're not anticipating having. So yeah, one of Axel's best moves also creates one of his dumbest situations, where landing a counter hit is arguably worse than having it blocked. At least if it's blocked, I can maintain my pressure and run a block string. But if it counter hits, the opponent's probably going to air tech before I can get a move out. Mixing in 5K makes this scenario way less likely for me now that 3P isn't making up 90% of my Oki. It also gets me experimenting with different routes, letting me make things more confusing for my opponents since I'm no longer doing the same 3 ground combos over and over again. I made things a lot easier for myself because I bothered to take 5 minutes to practice. Just imagine what you could do with 15. And on the flip side, when I was too lazy to take just 5 minutes to practice before going online, I noticed a decline immediately. My movement turned to shit. Moving on, in the first episode of this series, I talked about finally getting into Third Strike, a game that was prominently featured at EVO this year. EVO 2024 was the biggest fighting game tournament ever, and in the wake of that accomplishment, there was the announcement that Sony would be running more EVO-sized events under the EVO name across the globe. Surprisingly, this was met with a lot of pushback. The biggest dissenters were saying that this would water down the EVO brand and make the winner's accomplishments mean less. The funniest critique I saw, though, was a comparison to WWE, how WWE only holds one WrestleMania. While the comparison is a bit flawed, I do think it lays the groundwork for how you can make these other EVOs interesting in their own ways beyond just being EVO in a different place. But before we get into applying these ideas to EVO, I want to give some background on how WWE handles things so you have some context for where I'm coming from. WWE as a brand runs 12 pay-per-views a year minimum, whereas there's only one EVO. EVO Japan exists, but it wasn't counted in this discussion, so I'm not gonna count it either. But my point here is that the comparison would only work if WrestleMania was WWE's only show of the year. But it's not. WWE runs a big pay-per-view every month, and there's been multiple instances in their history where they've run 2 pay-per-views in a single month. Now, none of them are as important as WrestleMania, but they're still big money-making shows. The comparison gets even more fun when you look at how WWE has started doing the exact same thing EVO plans on doing, and it's resulted in massive success for them. Since the pandemic restrictions lessened, WWE has started running a lot more of their pay-per-views outside of the United States, whereas before that, you could probably count on one hand the amount of major shows WWE ran outside of the US and Canada in the company's entire history. Now, while they run 12 pay-per-views a year, WWE has historically had 4 shows that they push above all else. The Royal Rumble in January, WrestleMania a few months later, SummerSlam in the summer, and the Survivor Series around Thanksgiving. In the past 15 years, it's become a big 5 with the addition of Money in the Bank, and this approach is something I think EVO could benefit from emulating. Now, for 2 of these events, they're just about how amazing wrestling is. WrestleMania centers on being the grandest stage of them all, while SummerSlam goes for a more party atmosphere. But that's really it. Those shows are focused on a vibe, there's no big catch to them beyond how awesome wrestling is. But with the Royal Rumble, Money in the Bank, and the Survivor Series, we get shows built around gimmick matches, match types you don't otherwise see on WWE shows. And here we see the setup for Sony making these new EVO events feel different and special in their own ways. EVO Vegas is obviously their WrestleMania, keep that as is, but give the rest of these events gimmicks. It would be really interesting if EVO Japan, EVO France, EVO Brazil all had their own different tournament structures and names to help them stand out from just being another version of this thing that already exists. Imagine if EVO Japan became the spiritual successor to Super Battle Opera, doing massive one-and-done knockout-style tournaments for each game. For EVO Brazil, make every game a team tournament. 2-on-2, 3-on-3, honestly as high as you can go to where it's still logistically feasible. Team tournaments really aren't a thing in fighting games. Co-op Cup exists for Third Strike still, and Tekken has Master Cup, but we don't get that for any other game. Those are just a few ideas, but I think they could go a long way in giving these new EVOs their own identities beyond just being the children of EVO Vegas. This would even serve to somewhat placate those thinking about the value of these EVO wins versus an EVO Vegas win. If they're winning under different conditions and formats, you don't have to judge the titles one-to-one, they become their own thing. To WWE fans, a Royal Rumble win is different from a Money in the Bank win, is different from being the sole survivor in a Survivor Series match, is different from a win at WrestleMania. You are the best under a given format, under these conditions. We could even have specialists. The mindset best suited for taking a single game in a one-and-done knockout-style format is different from the mindset needed for a longer set, and would thus be better for different players. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that matter. Now back to talking about games I've been playing, I changed mains in Third Strike and am now learning Akuma. This came after seeing a comment under some Third Strike footage where someone gave a little rundown on how Akuma's the most balanced character in the game. It feels weird to say that about Akuma, right? But it's pretty true. Akuma in Third Strike has some great tools, but he lacks anything that's outright broken, along with his normal drawback of having the worst health in the game. Another drawback with Akuma is actually something that made him easier for me to learn. Akuma is the worst user of meter in Third Strike, and it's not even close. He doesn't have EX moves like the rest of the cast, meaning you'll only be using meter when doing a super. This helped me a lot since I didn't have to think about meter management beyond knowing if I had a full bar or not. I didn't have to weigh using an EX move versus conserving meter for my super since the former just wasn't in play. But funny enough, another downside with Akuma is that none of his supers stand out as being particularly strong. His Hoboken super is the default since it's the safest, has the most confirms, and lets you punish the opponent if they try to parry it at certain ranges. And even then, it's only like a 7.5 out of 10 since it scales like hell at the end of any half-decent combo. But again, a limitation of Akuma proved helpful for me. This isn't a super I can just throw out with the intention of it getting me out of a bad situation. It's good where it fits, but it isn't something spammable. Akuma feeling this natural to play has me wondering why I was so hung up on Ibuki being the character that let me make 3S feel like Guilty Gear. I was so focused on emulating a combo style I felt was fun, and not a playstyle that actually matched me. Ibuki having chain combos is fine, but the kind of match I like to play doesn't involve me running up to the opponent and staying in close. My ideal fighting game character lets me play like an annoying coward, just throwing out ranged attacks, being a pest about controlling space. Akuma is really good at that. While Third Strike isn't a fireball game in the slightest thanks to parrying, Akuma's combination of a fast, grounded Haboken, a more powerful half-circle back Haboken that needs 2 or 3 parries at times, and an air Haboken for rangy pressure off jumps, combines to make a zoning option really fun. I only know one real combo with him, but that's also part of the fun, and it got me to experience Negative Edge for the first time. For those that don't know, Negative Edge is when a game counts both the press of a button and the release of a button as individual actions. Street Fighter games let you do this on specials and supers, and good players take advantage of this by pianoing their punches or kicks to effectively turn 1-frame links into 6-frame links. But a bad Street Fighter player has it get in the way of him learning a B&B. Crouching medium kick, light Tatsu, heavy Shoryuken, the quintessential Akuma combo. The Shoryuken ender is actually really easy, it's getting there that's hard. Here's why. If I release medium kick at the same time that I press light kick, both buttons are counted. And since Street Fighter also has strong to weak button priority, meaning that pressing buttons of different strengths at the same time will always result in the stronger button coming out, the Negative Edge medium kick takes priority over the regular press light kick. This makes things difficult with Akuma because while his light Tatsu does combo into heavy Shoryuken, his medium Tatsu doesn't. This made things really fucking frustrating, since I initially tried to just release medium kick faster. It's the ultimate beginner hangup, thinking that the reason a combo didn't work is because your inputs weren't fast enough. In reality, the solution is often to go slow. In my case, it was hit medium kick, then hold that button in place while you hit light kick to get the Tatsu, so that way Negative Edge isn't in play at all. Overall, it's been a fun challenge learning Akuma and trying to take advantage of what he does well. Landing Raging Demon is my favorite thing about him, and I'll always start hunting for it if I haven't landed it after a few games. At my current level, I found that the most consistent ways to land it are as Oki and counter Oki, which really surprised me. I'm miles away from learning Kara Demons, but when I do, I'm gonna be spamming that shit like there's no tomorrow. Speaking of spam, Blackheart. Just look at him, he's awesome. Properly learning Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is something I've had a stop-start relationship with for a while now. It comes and goes, but ever since the announcement of the MVC collection, I've tried to find something that works for me. The coolest thing about Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is that there's a ton of characters and a ton of options. The worst thing about Marvel vs. Capcom 2, for me, was that all of these options created analysis paralysis. Another issue is that my nature is to want to be weird. Sentinel, Storm, Magneto? Fuck that, I want a Spiral Ken team, a Juggernaut Silver Samurai team, characters that don't get seen often. But that's hard. The resources for learning those characters barely exist if they even do at all, and the pace of Marvel makes learning in the loss way harder because of how fast it can snowball. Recently, I've been hung up on Blackheart. He just looks cool and his Meteor Super hits all the fun neurons in my brain that make me like something. My first thought was to pair him with M. Bison and some other villain characters, a team full of fighters with black hearts. Plus, Bison's evil Rocket Energy Super allows for an easy DHC into Blackheart's cool Meteor Super, which can otherwise be really difficult to combo into since it's extremely range dependent for being a projectile super. But Bison's problem is that, like a lot of Capcom characters, he's not that combo friendly and overall has pretty poor range on his normals. But at some point, I do want to go back to Bison, because I think there could be something there with Blackheart's anti-air assist plus Bison's teleport as an easy way to get into air combos. Then I got it in my head that Anakaris was the call, another freaky looking character. Apparently Blackheart's a decent enough partner for it, since Blackheart's anti-air assist works in a consistent setup for Anakaris' Curse Infinite. It seems like they would make a fun pair once I'm better at the game, but again, it just didn't feel right at the moment. What finally helped me find a team for Blackheart was reading a 2009 GameFaqs guide for the character and realizing that my approach to him was all wrong. You don't need combos to play Blackheart at a beginner level, like, at all. This guide broke it down as throwing Jumping Heavy Punch 90% of the time. That move is a lot of fun since even if it misses while coming out, the demons come back to Blackheart a little bit and can hit the opponents that get between them and it. With Akuma zoning being fun in Third Strike and taking the advice that my strategy with Blackheart should be 90% annoy them with demons, I let go of the hopes of being quirky with teammate selection and just objectively looked at characters that would let me play like an annoying coward. So Commando and then Cable. The strategy here is really simple. Build meter with Blackheart's demons while protecting him with double anti-air assists, then do Inferno into his Depths of Hell demon super, DHC into Cable, then continue spamming with Jumping Heavy Punch since that's also an amazing move with Cable. This team fits really well together while also fitting my playstyle perfectly and not asking me to have any execution. This team is fun nonsense. I've been having a ton of fun using it in actual matches instead of just wasting time in training mode trying to learn launch combos with Blackheart. While I learn this team further, I'm also gonna look at a potential rushdown character to fill in for Commando or Cable when a matchup starts counter-zoning me a bit too well. Someone like Rogue or Magneto. Rogue's not exactly a top tier character, but I've seen people use her really well against top tier teams, and her grab assist looks like it could create some really fun options. Speaking of lower tier characters, I got to play some low tier specific matches, which to me meant nobody in B tier or above, all of which my main team fell into. In that environment, using two of my favorite characters together, Ken and Juggernaut, felt pretty viable from a beginner standpoint since there's no big zoner or fly state annoyances that would really punish them down here like they do in the top tiers of play. No Storm, no Sentinel, no Magneto, no Iron Man, no Doctor Doom, so it made playing two brawlers with limited movement a lot more fun. Not having much of a plan beyond using two of my favorites, I put Thanos next to them because his bubble super felt like a safe call, but I'm not sure if I would stick with him going forward on this team. I also tried Colossus next to them, who felt fun to use. His command grab is pretty cool, though I do wish he had a super version of it since he lacks a straightforward blunt force super, but I'll definitely be playing with him more, if not on this team then on a different one. So I have my high tier team and 2/3 of my low tier team. I feel like I actually know where I'm going with learning Marvel 2 for once, and it's funny how different the two teams are. Blackheart and friends are so focused on keeping you out, while Ken and Juggernaut need to be at range 0 to do much of anything. Now on the first episode of this series, one of my longtime subscribers made a comment saying that they hope this evolves into being hour-long episodes, and just looking at the length of this script up to this point, they might be onto something. We're already a quarter of the way there, and I don't feel like I've touched on that much. So let's talk about more fighting games. My Dojo Masters video has been blowing up lately. It went from something like 1,500 views last month to 10k views since the game released in mid-July. I've been sure to put in some serious time with the game since then, and I am more confident than ever that one day Dojo Masters will be the most hyped bracket at a major tournament. It goes so fucking fast and seems to be built to create super tense moments almost every match. Its system mechanics make for such a fun experience. Now, would it surprise you to learn that I main Dojo Master's equivalent of a zoner? Muay Thai's game is built on a lot of prodding, then either punishing you with a flying knee when you try to get in, or going in himself and getting a quick grab that can either lead to you bleeding health when he goes for punches, or tripping you up for a knockdown. They're a zoner whose win condition could just as easily be focused on their throws as it is their zoning, and I love that. With Dojo Masters, it's so easy to get in like 50 matches in a single sitting. My rule as of late has been that I'll hop off after 20 wins. Mind you, I'm mediocre at best at fighting games, and getting 20 wins in something like Guilty Gear Plus R might take me an hour and a half if I'm facing decent competition. The same goes for games like Tekken or Street Fighter, but with Dojo Masters, even if I'm playing like ass, I can hit that mark in like 30 minutes. The game lets you get so many reps in such a short amount of time that you'll always be getting situational second chances. That weird situation that caught you and lost you a game, there's a good chance you'll get another shot at it in the next 5 minutes. This game is really player friendly in that respect. In other news, my Samurai Showdown 6 video has also been doing pretty well, and more than anything, has given the game's tournament organizers something they can link to under the tweets promoting those events and say, if you've never heard of this game, here's an instant primer on it. In making that video with Toast Rider, SamShow 6 now has a really simple resource to get people started with it, including character suggestions for each of the game's spirit choices. Right after that video came out, I played in a few SamShow 6 tournaments, the first of which was actually a gimmick tournament where everyone had to use one spirit. I figured since we were using the most basic spirit, I'd make the most basic character choice and went with Haomaru. Back when I was playing SamShow 2019 solo for a few years, Haomaru was the only character I picked, and I think he really embodies what's so cool about Samurai Showdown's pacing. There's also a great simplicity to Haomaru that I enjoy. Like, I can get by with having pretty awful execution as long as I pick my spots correctly. Even 2-hit combos aren't a necessity with Haomaru, so long as you smartly time your single hits. And when he lands a hit, he does a lot of damage. One Spirit Haomaru is actually pretty solid. During one of those tournaments, one of my opponents said they entered because they saw my video. That makes me so happy, like I've been part of the reason someone gave this game a shot. That alone makes that video a 100% success for me, and it gets me to my next game, Big Bang Beat Revolve, a game I have either already put out a video on, or will soon. This came about by one of that game's players saying that they wish they had a video for Big Bang Beat Revolve, like the one I made for Sam Show 6, that they could show to potential new players. Seeing a fun opportunity, I told them that if they sent me a script, I would probably make a video out of it. And so, I have. And if this becomes my role in the fighting game community, getting scripts from people who play lesser known games and giving them a video that they can say to potential new players, watch this to see why my favorite game is awesome and you should play it with me, I would be overjoyed. Helping smaller games reach more people and giving proponents of those games a resource they can use to get more people to check out their game, that would be amazing. I want to be known as someone that you can send a script to and trust that you'll get something good out of it that helps promote your niche game. Plus, it's a very symbiotic setup. I get to showcase more niche fighting games on my channel without having to do a deep dive into them myself, while the person or group that sends me the script gets a useful promotional piece to share with potential new players. I love this stuff so much. I love the thought of helping smaller games get more players and potentially introducing someone to their new favorite game that they otherwise wouldn't have heard about in a capacity that captured them. And if Fightcade ever gets GBA functionality, I will absolutely be making a primer video myself on the beat 'em on games, because those games are awesome competitive fun, so much so that I've previously made a video on them. Smaller games, games that don't really fit in amongst the mainstream titles, those are the games I live for. Now, do I talk about the game that's allegedly coming out in October, or do I wait until we have more than just combo footage? Bye.